Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at a column from page number 6 of the Delhi edition. This column is written by Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon, the former National Security Advisor of India and as well as the former Foreign Secretary of India. In this article, the author evaluates India's path to power in a world that is adrift where the global order is shifting. See, in today's global order, the geopolitical and economic center of gravity has been shifting from the Atlantic region towards the Asia Pacific region. A few decades ago, during the Cold War era, the global economic center of gravity was centered around the Atlantic, when North America and Europe were the leading regions of the world. As the economic center of gravity lay around the Atlantic region, it even transformed into the geopolitical hub of the world. So, from the 1950s to early 2000, the Atlantic region was the focal point of global economics and geopolitics. But over the last 2 to 3 decades, this center of gravity has shifted towards the Asia Pacific region as a result of the staggering economic and geopolitical rise of the Asian powers. The region, which accounts for nearly 51% of the global population and 38% of the global GDP, has been led by Asian powers such as China, India, Japan, the ASEAN group, and even by countries such as South Korea. Parallelly, in the West, we have seen a decline of the Atlantic powers, both with regard to their economic and geopolitical significance. And as the Cold War ended and as the European economies declined, the Asia Pacific region has become the focal point of the global economy and global geopolitics. So, naturally, the leading superpower of the world, that is the United States, gradually started shifting its attention towards the Asia region by realigning its policies and priorities from the Atlantic towards the Asia Pacific. So, in this world, where the economic and geopolitical center of gravity are shifting, the writer argues that the world has become adrift as there is no set global order. Because today, we neither live in a bipolar world like the Cold War days, when the world was clearly divided between the two superpower blocs led by the US and the Soviet Union. At the same time, the current world order is not exactly a multipolar world order, but we do have multiple power centers that are emerging around the world. The writer further illustrates that the world is adrift and that the global order is not stable because even today we are not able to form a coherent international response for any major global events. For example, look at the global response towards the impact of climate change and global warming. Or even look at the global response towards the pandemic. With regard to any such challenging situation, the world has failed to respond in a united manner, and there is no coherent international response that is forthcoming. According to the writer, this clearly points towards the ineffectiveness of our multilateral institutions, such as the UN, and it further illustrates the point that the world order is adrift, where the new emerging power centers are yet to find their feet, and existing superpowers like the US are unable to lead the world. The writer recognizes that even though the US is the most formidable power today, it is clearly a power that is in decline, and even as China is surging ahead to replace the US as the global power, China is being constrained by its own internal and external limitations. So, in this global order that is adrift, if India has to rise and emerge as a major power, then it will require an effective strategy. According to the writer, this would require both an economic strategy and as well as a geopolitical strategy. The writer argues that in a world that is adrift, globalization is on the retreat as several economies have become more inward looking, thus leading to regionalization of trade. As the geopolitical and economic balance of power is shifting from the United States towards China, the trade wars between major economies have gone up, leading to more closed economies and the retreat of globalization. And countries have moved more towards regionalization of trade, by promoting their own regional trade blocs, and by coming out with more conservative economic and trade policies. In the middle of these ongoing changes in the global economy and geopolitics, inequalities, both within a country and outside a country, is rising, thereby leading to the growth of narrow conservative ideologies such as ultra nationalism and as well as religious extremism and fundamentalism. These changes have been further accelerated due to the impact of climate change and the pandemic. And as a coordinated global response is lacking, it creates several unique challenges and as well as opportunities for emerging powers like India. See, as Asia becomes the focus of global economics and geopolitics, it is bound to bring China into confrontation with the other Asian powers, such as India. But however, the writer points out that China seems to be in a hurry to replace the US as a global power, which probably suggests that China sees a very small window of opportunity to overtake the US, because currently its aggressive rise is being pushed back by the Western countries. And within the Asia region as well, China is facing several constraints, both in the maritime domain and as well as in the continental land area. According to the writer, it may not be possible for China to establish its complete supremacy or hegemony in Asia, but it definitely is going to continue its aggressive expansionist behavior, and the impact of this will be felt by the peripheral countries like India. So while this friction is expected to continue between China and other Asian neighbors, there will still be enough opportunities available for cooperation as well with China. On similar lines, the India China relationship is expected to be marked by a mix of confrontation and cooperation, and this is something that we have seen over the last 10 to 15 years as well. For example, even as the border dispute persists between India and China, it almost never escalates into a full fledged conflict or a war. But even as they confront each other on such strategic issues, there is a long history of cooperation as well between the two countries in several other domains. In the last 15 years, we have seen that even as India and China were competing strategically in the Indian Ocean, and even as the border dispute was raging, there were several other platforms where the two countries were cooperating with each other. For instance, at institutions such as BRICS, World Bank, IMF, and even with regard to the Climate Change Convention, India and China have collaborated together as they both had similar concerns and similar interests. So, this complex mix of confrontation and cooperation is likely to continue in the India China relationship, and this highlights the need for India to firmly maintain its principle of strategic autonomy in its foreign policy. Because, on one hand, in the last 15 years, India has gotten very close to the United States, especially in the strategic and defense domain. This growing alignment with the US shouldn't mean that India should divorce itself from its equation with China. And even as it works with the US and other middle powers, it will have to remain engaged with other key powers as well, such as China and Russia, for example. See, India's growing strategic relations with the US is critical, not just in the field of counterterrorism, defense cooperation, and intelligence sharing, but it is also going to be very significant to transform India in other areas such as energy, trade, investment, education, and healthcare. The US is going to be a key partner for India with regard to development of renewable energy and also for making progress with regard to digital technologies and emerging high-end technologies. Parallelly, our ties with other middle powers like Israel, Japan, Australia, Germany, and the others is going to be equally important for both strategic and economic reasons. At the same time, India will have to remain aligned with any power whose interests and capabilities align with India's interests and capabilities, even if this means cooperating with the rivals of US such as China and Russia. That is when India can craft a path to emerge as a significant economic and strategic power in the world. And for this to happen, India will have to continue pushing Asia towards multipolarity where multiple powers can coexist. And it may even have to re envision a new edition of the non aligned movement in order to retain its principle of strategic autonomy. As long as India maintains this independent foreign policy and remains aligned with any country with whom its interests and capabilities coincide, then India can hope to successfully navigate this emerging world order. An independent autonomous foreign policy will also allow India to focus on its region and its immediate neighborhood, and this would call for the revival of regional organizations like the SAARC, which has long been neglected by India. If India aspires to emerge as a key power, it can no longer ignore regional groupings like SAARC just because of the problems created by few countries such as Pakistan. In order to retain multipolarity in Asia and remain non aligned, India's regional focus on the neighborhood will be very important, and it will have to try and revive not just the SAARC grouping, but it should also give additional focus and attention to the Indian Ocean region by possibly creating a maritime commission for the Indian Ocean and by giving more attention to Bay of Bengal initiatives such as the BIMSTEC. So, such independent engagement by India in the Asia region, based on its core national interests, will help in creating a multipolar Asia, which would help fulfill the larger geopolitical and economic ambitions of India. But for this to happen, apart from maintaining an independent autonomous foreign policy, it will have to become self reliant in key areas, especially with regard to its economic development and technological progress. India cannot ignore the fact that our domestic trajectory, that is, what happens within the country, will directly influence the external course of India, and this would require India to move away from its critical dependency on other countries, and its internal policies will have to help India emerge as a self reliant economic and technological power. At the same time, India will have to firmly remain rooted to its constitutional values and civilizational heritage, and at any cost, it will have to continue upholding its democratic secular traditions because adverse developments within the country is going to directly affect India's external trajectory as well. So, in conclusion, these are the various aspects that India will have to keep in mind while crafting a strategy to help India emerge as a leading power, even as the geopolitical and economic centers of gravity are shifting towards the Asia Pacific. Now, let's take up a column from page number 7, in which the writer argues that the World Trade Organization is facing an existential crisis, and there is an urgent need to revive the WTO in order to preserve the rules-based multilateral trading mechanism. See, the WTO was established as an intergovernmental organization in the year 1995 to replace the GATT, or the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. By replacing the GATT, the WTO enabled the neoliberal world order which was emerging, and it championed the objectives of free market capitalism and fair trade. Its main objective was to restrict unfair trade practices and trade distorting practices in order to provide for a level playing field for all the countries in a multilateral world order. Back then, the formation of this organization was championed by the United States, as it saw such an organization to be in the interest of its capitalist markets. But of late, the US has been losing interest in the WTO, and it is even aggressively trying to undermine the WTO. Now, this is quite ironic because a couple of decades ago, it was the US which was championing the WTO mechanism. But today, since the WTO mechanism hasn't entirely worked out in its interests, it is actively trying to undermine the organization, which has pushed the WTO into an existential crisis. The reason why the US is acting against the WTO is because the US has come to believe that the free and fair trading mechanism created by the WTO largely benefited developing nations like China and pushed US into several trade disputes with other developing countries like India. So this short-sighted view of the US led the previous president Donald Trump to actively pursue policies which would undermine the WTO. These Trump-era policies are currently being pursued by President Joe Biden as well, thus pushing the WTO to the brink of irrelevance. See, the biggest problem that the US sees with the WTO is the appellate body. The appellate body, which is a permanent body consisting of 7 members, was set up as a dispute settlement mechanism in order to resolve trade disputes amongst the members. This dispute settlement mechanism allowed other countries like India to challenge the trade distorting practices of the US, which undermined the capitalist economic interests of the US. So, after having faced several cases at the appellate body of the WTO, the US has been deliberately acting to put an end to the functioning of the appellate body. Over the last few years, the US has been blocking appointments to this permanent body, and as a result of the rising vacancies, the appellate body has stopped functioning since 2019. The US even stalled an alternative proposal of the European Union to establish a new arbitration mechanism that could provide for the resolution of trade disputes. So, this constant undermining of the WTO appellate body by the US has increasingly made the WTO irrelevant because without an effective dispute settlement mechanism, the WTO rules and decisions can be conveniently violated by the members, as currently they don't face penalties for non-compliance. So, in this context, the writer appeals to the WTO members to quickly revive the organization and save the dispute settlement mechanism by making use of the opportunity at the upcoming WTO ministerial meeting. He is calling upon the WTO members to quickly revive the appellate body, or at least to provide for the establishment of an alternate arbitration mechanism, along with taking concrete steps to address the 4 key challenges that are affecting the WTO and the global economic order. The first unresolved issue is with regard to public stockholding for the sake of food security. See, for ensuring food security and for providing adequate income to farmers, developing countries like India, they provide a support price known as the MSP or the minimum support price. Through this arrangement, India guarantees an income to the farmers and also provides for procurement in order to build up its buffer stock and create a public stockholding of essential grains, which guarantees food security through the PDS system. But under the current WTO rules, such support prices are seen as trade distorting because they are considered as budgetary support. They are essentially equated with government subsidies, and as a result, there is currently a cap on the extent of minimum price support that countries like India can provide for public stockholding of food grains. But at the 2015 Nairobi summit, the member countries had agreed to find a permanent solution to this issue in order to ensure that these WTO restrictions doesn't affect food security in countries like India. But this permanent solution is yet to be found, mainly because of the disruptive activities of countries such as the United States. The second pending challenge is with regard to the TRIPS waiver that was sought by India and South Africa to provide for the free movement of COVID-19 related medical products without facing the hurdles of intellectual property rights. See, the TRIPS mechanism of the WTO, or the trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, provides for the protection and enforcement of intellectual property rights around the world. But with regard to essential technologies and essential products, IP regimes such as TRIPS can become a hurdle which adversely affects developing and underdeveloped nations. So last year, when the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, countries like India and South Africa proposed a TRIPS waiver for COVID-19 medical products in order to provide immediate medical assistance to developing and underdeveloped nations. But even on this issue, there has been disagreement where the developed nations led by the US and the European countries are blocking the TRIPS waiver, thereby hampering our fight against the pandemic. Next, another pending challenge at the WTO is with regard to regulating irrational subsidies that few countries are providing for fishing. Countries such as China, they are known to provide irrational subsidies to the fishing industry, which has led to the overexploitation of resources. So in order to prevent this and to conserve our marine resources while protecting livelihoods of fishermen, several WTO members are pushing for regulating such irrational subsidies given to fishing. It is through such subsidies that China has become the largest producer and exporter of fish. But the efforts of the other countries to regulate these subsidies has been derailed, and a permanent solution to this issue is yet to be found. Then the other major challenge facing the WTO is the rise of regional trading agreements such as RCEP and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. As major powers like US and China have moved away from the WTO, they tried championing their own regional trading blocs, which includes the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was championed by US until Donald Trump withdrew the US from the agreement. And it also includes the RCEP, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, primarily championed by China, which was signed last year. India even quit the RCEP negotiations due to domestic concerns about its industry. But the rising preference of global powers to opt for such regional trading blocs undermines the WTO because it fragments the global governance mechanism on trade. As regional trading blocs come into picture, the global trading mechanism under WTO gets weakened, thereby making the only multilateral trade organization irrelevant. Considering these challenges faced by the WTO and its existential crisis, countries like India have been repeatedly calling for protecting the WTO mechanism because currently this is the only fair multilateral mechanism that exists, which provides for a rules-based order with regard to global trade. For countries like India, the survival of WTO and its effectiveness is crucial in order to fight against the unilateralism and economic nationalism of countries like US and China. Hence, the writer is calling upon the WTO members to make use of the upcoming WTO ministerial meeting to find solutions to some of these challenges so that we can help WTO avert this existential crisis. Now let's take up an editorial from page number 6 that deals with the topic of road safety and the ethics of road safety. See, when it comes to road safety, India is one of the most dangerous countries. According to a latest study, India ranks third in the world with regard to the highest number of road accidents after US and Japan. But however, when it comes to road accident related fatalities, India ranks the highest, and according to latest data brought out by the National Crime Records Bureau, India registered around 1.33 lakh road accident related deaths last year. In this regard, the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has announced an initiative recently to reward good Samaritans who help out road accident victims. See, generally people are hesitant to help out road accident victims because they fear being harassed by the police and the hospital authorities. So to put an end to this practice and to encourage the good Samaritans to help out road accident victims, an entire chapter was included under the Motor Vehicles Act. This chapter was dedicated to sensitize the police forces and the hospital authorities to stop harassing the good Samaritans who might be helping out road accident victims by trying to help them get basic medical assistance. By including these provisions in the Motor Vehicles Act, the government pointed out to the public that there won't be any legal consequences for good Samaritans who are helping out road accident victims. Then, to further encourage such acts of good behavior, the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has announced a financial reward as an incentive, and through the state governments and the district level authorities, the centre has proposed to award 5,000 rupees to such good Samaritans along with a good behavior certificate. The editorial argues that while such measures are appreciable, what we really need to promote road safety in the country is institutional and infrastructural measures. Because with better engineering, with better safety measures, and with scientific measures, many of the road accidents are actually preventable. For example, by improving the quality of our roads and by ensuring that roads are designed scientifically, we can definitely prevent many of the road accidents. Then by coming out with scientific road safety standards and by strictly enforcing them, along with strict enforcement of traffic laws, the number of road accidents and road accident related fatalities can be definitely brought down. Recently, the centre has implemented a long pending institutional reform by establishing the National Road Safety Board, which will help in formulating these road safety standards. In a related column on page number 7, the author makes the exact same argument. He argues that road accidents can be reduced drastically in the country by improving our road infrastructure and safety standards. The writer reminds us that India took up a commitment under the United Nations Brasilia Declaration to bring down the death rate due to road accidents by 50% by 2020. This international commitment of India has even been enshrined in the Motor Vehicles Act of 2019. But despite this, India is yet to make a lot of progress as it continues to register the highest number of road accident related deaths in the world. And the only way through which these deaths can be prevented is by improving our road infrastructure and by promoting and enforcing better road safety standards. Now let's look at these two articles from page number 1 and 8, which are related to India's relations with the US. These articles have been published in the context of the visit of US Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman to India. During this high-profile visit, the US Deputy Secretary of State has interacted with India's Foreign Secretary and have discussed several key issues in the bilateral relationship. First, the US has expressed displeasure over India's S-400 deal with Russia. So the S-400, or also known as the Triumph, is an advanced air defense missile that India is looking to procure from Russia in order to strengthen its air defense. After India and Russia signed the deal in 2018, the US has threatened India with secondary sanctions under the CATSA law of the US. See, CATSA is American law which stands for Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. This legislation declares Russia, North Korea, and Iran as the adversary states of the US. Through this law, the US has placed primary sanctions on these three countries, and any other country which trades with these three countries, especially in the domains of defense and oil and gas, those countries invite the risk of secondary sanctions. For example, countries like China and Turkey have already been brought under secondary sanctions for procuring the S-400 missiles from Russia, which is facing primary sanctions under CATSA. So since then, the US has opposed India's S-400 deal as well with Russia, and India has been trying to seek a presidential exemption as it believes that procuring the S-400 is strategically important for India for building up its air defense against Pakistan and especially against China. So this crucial issue has been discussed between the two key officials, along with reviewing the nature of economic relations between the two, and they have even taken stock of the current situation in Afghanistan. It is also important to note that the India-US defense relations are progressing really well, and the two officials have exchanged their views before the upcoming key interactions between India and US in the defense domain. In the next few weeks, India and US are all set to hold the defense policy dialogue headed by their respective defense secretaries, followed by a joint working group on counterterrorism, along with the next edition of the 2+2 ministerial dialogue between the defense and foreign ministers of the two countries. The two officials have even exchanged views about vaccine partnership to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, and the US has appreciated India for restarting vaccine exports. So these developments help you understand that even though the India-US relations are flourishing across multiple domains, there are still pressing issues and challenges as well. Coming to the last article on page number 10, the Supreme Court has asked firecracker manufacturers as to why they continue stocking barium, which has been banned. See, barium is a highly toxic chemical which is used by firecracker manufacturers to produce green-colored sparks. The usage of this toxic chemical has been banned by the Supreme Court in 2018, and despite this, several firecracker manufacturers, they continue to store and stock barium, and reportedly, it continues to be used in the manufacturing of firecrackers. Hence, the Supreme Court has taken a firm stand and has sought a reply from the firecracker manufacturers as to why the ban on this toxic chemical is not being followed by them. Now let's look at the mains practice questions for today. The first question: India's path to power will be affected by the geopolitical and economic centers of gravity now shifting towards Asia. Examine. The second question. The WTO is facing an existential crisis. Do you agree? Elucidate. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the answer writing portal, for which the link shall be shared in the description box below. So this concludes our discussion for today. Thanks for watching.